Hi, everyone. This is Bill Free, and I'm happy to join with you this week for the Awareness Podcast. And I'm so happy to introduce my guest today. Caverly Morgan is an amazing individual, and I was just talking to her a little bit prior to pressing the record button because I realized as I was reading her manuscript that we met probably 5 years ago at a Rupert Spira retreat in San Francisco. And I remember leaving that retreat thinking, oh, I didn't get that woman's contact information. And now here we are connected again. So the universe has a nice sense of humor and also is perfectly aligned. Hi, Caverly. It's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Bill, it's a real honor to be here, and I just consider you such a kindred spirit. So thank you so much for, as I was mentioning before this call started, everything you're doing in the world and all the ways that your love of truth and beauty and shared being are manifesting through you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I also ran into Caverly 6 months ago as we did our first filming for Awakening Mind and Rupert Spira. And Caverly was one of the individuals at the retreat we interviewed. And I think she'll show up in one of the trailers prior to the film. And if not in that way, she'll probably show up. More than likely, she'll show up in Awakening Mind, one of our episodes. I'm hoping that that would be so, but we'll just see what happens. And Caverly, I love this book that you wrote. And before I start talking about the book, I want to give our audience just a little short piece of your bio so that they know who you are. I gave a few points of who you are. But Caverly is a meditation teacher, author, speaker, and nonprofit founder. She's the founder and lead contemplative of Peace in Schools, a nonprofit which created the nation's first for-credit mindfulness class in public high schools. And this is what I was talking about when I sat down in lunch with her at the Mercy Center about 5 years ago. She was talking about this. Everyone there was talking about what she was doing in the public schools. So this is so perfect that we now get to share this with our community and the world on this podcast. But she's also the founder of Presence Collective, a community of cross-cultural contemplatives committed to personal and collective transformation, creating spaces for wisdom exchange and belonging. Caverly blends the original spirit of Zen with a modern non-dual approach. Her practice began in 1995 and has included 8 years of training in a silent Zen monastery. She has been teaching contemplative practice since 2001. And for you all that are listening, I just want to give you a heads up to please go to caverlymorgan.com or .org and look at her website and find the rich heritage and legacy that she leaves the world with her imprint. I want to say before we get started, there was a couple of things on your website that caught my attention that I really loved reading. I mean, all of these great quotes from these beautiful teachers, many that are not here, but Amma, she gave a great quote there. Nowadays, everybody wants to become a leader. No one wants to become a servant. In reality, the world is badly in need of servants, not leaders. A real servant is a real leader. And that's what Caverly does. That's what the pull and the desire of our hearts. It's a pull to serve the Great Awakening, to serve the truth of awakening, because we have tasted of the fruit that Jesus spoke about, that Buddha talked about, that Ramana, all the great sages, Yogananda, Nisargadatta, all the great ones. And there's two more quotes I want to share from your website, Caverly, because you hang out with really rich people that are just, they just ooze with content of the experience that we know is true. We know it's true for the world. Here's another one, Peace Pilgrim. Oh my God. She was the inspiration of my heart when I first found A Course in Miracles. She was one of the people that actually the Course pulled me away from many years of Christianity, and I'm so grateful for that. But Peace Pilgrim, she's the one that pointed the way of selfless devotion. Oh my God, she's the poster child for selfless devotion to the truth and the peace. Her whole thing was just an amazing story. So Peace Pilgrim, and then finally Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you, Martin Luther King Jr. and what you did. You're the pinnacle of what truth stands for, justice and regard for everyone being equal. Martin Luther King has a statement here. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. Yeah. So those are just three. There are many more. Go to caverlymorgan.org. Caverly, I just am blessed to know more about you. The more I read about you, the more, I've gotten into your book. I watched your interview with Rick Archer at Buddha at the Gas Pump. That was awesome. And in that interview, you were talking. Rick asked you if you had a book. Not yet. Now you've got two. You've got your book, your kids' book, and I think that's a really great little kids' book. It's a kids' book about mindfulness. Here's a copy of it for you all that are watching. And this was her first book, and her newest book that comes out November 29th, The Heart of Who We Are. Caverly, I'm going to stop talking and let you tell us a little bit about what inspired the book, and a little bit about maybe maybe some of the feeling that you got from the endorsements. They were awesome. They're worth just reading by themselves before reading the book. But thank you for being on this podcast.
Bill, in this moment, I just want to acknowledge how I'm feeling quite moved by being in conversation with you. And having been a monastic for a long time, as you've heard, I live very much in the relative plane of reality, intersecting with teenagers who are really struggling in schools right now, intersecting with staff who are under tremendous pressures, intersecting with a lot of family hardships at the moment. Next to me is my beloved toy poodle who I've lived with for over 15 years, and he's in his last chapter of life. And I feel so present in this moment to what's most important. And it's such a joy to pause in my day and connect with you and have you reflect back the wisdom of people who have impacted my life, which you're reading from the page where I'm simply listing influences. as you know, I come from a Zen tradition where what's customary is to be waving a flag of lineage. And I don't wave a flag of specific lineage, but my heart waves a flag of truth and love and beauty, as yours does. And so it's quite touching and sweet to have the reflection of this kind of wisdom to preface everything we're talking about with collective wisdom, which leads me perfectly to the book, because the book is about the collective. Thanks for doing a little flash of the kids' book about mindfulness. I do want to just toss in, for anyone who isn't familiar with that book, it's the publisher required me to use the word mindfulness, but it's, as you saw, Bill, not really a book about mindfulness. It's not simply about, for example, teaching children how to direct their attention to the present moment. It's dedicated to Rupert, as you saw, and it's a book that is about asking big questions, which I know drive your life as well, right? Like living into the inquiry of who am I in all the ways that we do, and expressing our understanding in all the ways that we do. So yes, my next book, I'm quite happy with the cover of this one too. So this is the heart of who we are. I feel lucky to have gotten a designer that I think is quite good through Sounds True. And I hadn't remembered that I had told Rick, dear Rick Archer, I hadn't remembered that I had said to him I was going to work on a book or was working on a book. But yeah, this was a real journey for me, Bill. This book was a real journey. And I would say that one of the reasons it was such a big journey is because I chose to speak about race in this book, race in relationship to my understanding of truth. I wanted to, there was something I felt called to reconcile for myself with this project. And it's not a book about race, but it's a book that touches race. And it's a book that touches other relative plane issues, like being in a classroom when you learn that one of your teens has been struggling with recognizing that he's an alcoholic. So there are a lot of stories through the book about my experience and what my experience in this relative world and what it's been like to have a deep call to have my actions be on behalf of my deepest understanding, rather than my actions be on behalf of the ego or the mind of limitation or the conditioned mind, as I talk about in the book. So the reason it's important to acknowledge collective and to preface the call with collective wisdom is that this book is about moving from the personal to the collective as well. So how can we take, for example, practices I was offered at the monastery, have them infuse, these are progressive path practices actually, but they're, hopefully I pulled off having them infused with direct understanding, so that someone, for example, who comes to the book and hasn't done a lot of, hasn't paid a lot of attention to the inner critic, for example, has a place to begin so that there can be some reconciliation around how to work with that. And then if we're going to work with that in a personal way, what's it like to work with that in a collective way? What is our collective inner critic? How does the collective ego manifest? And how can our deepest understanding of truth shift how our actions come to be on this relative plane?
Yeah, well, I found the influence in your book about the. I mean, I love where it came from. It really it is about awakening. It's about it's in the progressive element that you bring in with all of those many practices, well infused with the non-dual understanding, allows the reader to take baby steps and also deep steps, deep understand, deep self-inquiry and asking the difficult questions that like racism. That I mean, I think you're an advocate for or not for, but to an advocate for the for highlighting or spotlighting or putting on display to the spiritual community and other that there's a pink elephant in the room, and we need to call it a pink elephant, so that we can be healed in our own experience of the things that are unconscious or conscious, or just to be ambassadors for truth, for the justice that's due all men and women, all peoples. And actually, I think there needs to be another Caverly that does this for animals, because they're, we're animals, and those beautiful deer and things that are out there in wild, and skunks and everything else, they're God too. And so anyway, I was kind of curious when I saw how gently and beautifully your writing speaks to the harm done to the people of color, to the it's so clear, that just wasn't right. And we came in, I mean, I came in earlier than you did, and I remember the race riots in high school and junior high school, and it was ugly, and it needed to be ugly. It was an ugly thing that this country did hundreds of years ago, and we're in the cleanup still. So thank you for the way that you're presenting it. It's presented in your book as just another layer mechanism, or a an energy of conflict that keeps us from seeing being in all things exactly as it is, and there is unfair injustices that are given to people of color by just the fact that we're white. I would even say privileged white, only because white people seem to get the more benefits in this country, and it's not something that we should overlook. And also, I want to say that I don't think you're either anti-racist or racist. I think there's something else, maybe in the middle, because you don't have to be anti to be against or to be not for the injustices. So, what would you say to that?
Hmm. Well, I'll reflect back to you what I hear as um, perhaps at the heart of your statement, and you can tell me whether this feels accurate for you. But I hear you recognizing that if we're living into a truth, a non-dual truth, how can we be anti anything?
Right.
What, how can anti anything feel like it resonates as truth in our bones?
Yeah.
That said, so I agree with that statement. In my heart, I don't find that it can feel deeply authentic for me to be anti anything. At the same time, at Peace in Schools, we proudly say on our website, we are committed to practice of anti-racism. And the reason that's so important in this cultural context, I find, to name and to live into and own, is it's a way of recognizing that our entire system is so embedded with injustice, so profoundly infused with imbalance and injustice, that on that layer of reality, it can be helpful to name we're not participating in that as a practice, as a recognition that participating in that system will perpetuate harm and we won't be able to manifest collective action on behalf of truth and love and understanding if we just keep living out, having our actions live out through a system that was designed on behalf of the collective ego, serving the collective ego, furthering othering and communities in which not everyone has an experience of belonging, even though you and I know on the deepest level, there is no way not to belong. Everything is inherent belonging. Alone is a figment of the imagination. But that's not the day-to-day world we're existing in. And we definitely see that right now, more than ever in my lifetime. We see the fallout of, we're living in distortion collectively on the societal realm. So for that reason, it works for me to walk into a school and say, yes, we have an anti-bullying program that invites students to ask who they truly are so that they can release the distortion of othering. Am I, in the depths of my heart, anti-bullying? No, I'm a lover of truth. And if we're loving truth, living truth, we recognize that bullying is one example of a distortion that doesn't honor truth. I love Rupert's phrase, it's a breach in the recognition of our shared being. I use that phrase all the time. I think it perfectly summarizes where these tears in the fabric of inherent belonging happen and how. So I just happen to have a karmic profile that is such that I have this deep love of what you might talk about as the absolute, and this deep commitment to our everyday world. And yes, that does include animals. And just FYI, Bill, in the first go, I included a lot more about my own passion relationship with the animal world. And I got a lot of feedback that it was so vast. It just left my feedback was that the reader might feel a little bit like a little of this, little of this, little of this. So I decided to focus a bit more. But as you know, in the book, I talk about the distortion of our collective conditioned power over model versus power with. Mm-hmm. And that, as you know, can be applied to how our planet is in this very moment. We, as a collective human conscious, we are collectively applying a power over model to all of nature.
Yeah. Yeah, I thank you for that. I love the way you just framed all of that. The non-anti, and then also the activist. You're an activist. You're a total activist. You make me think of Jane Fonda or some great icon.
I'm definitely not a spit. I just want you to know that.
That's funny, but I think this whole idea needs a voice. You're a good one. This book really, to me, it really presents so well for folks that are on the spiritual path or not, that would like to look at their own introspection and self-inquiry for the things that are blocks or barriers to the awareness of love's presence, those things that keep us from living an embodied truth experience. And animal cruelty and racism and cruelty to other people of any color, it's just, it doesn't, it's like you can't, you're not going to have your own inner peace experience if you hold on to those things. So that everything needs to be looked at for the looking and the feeling and the dissolution.
And Bill, I appreciate that you just made the link between you won't be able to have that piece. You, in language that I think you would resonate with, like my knowing, my direct experience of God is impacted by the distortion of what I'm caught in if I'm enacting a power over model in any realm. And I do think that's important to name, because so often we talk about something like racism and we just focus on the other. So you and I, as two white-bodied people, might sit and talk about the marginalized population, rather than recognizing how suffering is arising because of my participation in that expression of dominance in ways that I'm so conditioned into that I don't even see in a lot of moments. So an example, just because you're passionate about animals as well, I grew up absolutely loving steak, loved it. My aunt was just teasing me the other day that it was impressive how much steak I could put away. And then I started spending more time around horses and cows. And I remember as a child, the moment I got it, what I was eating. But there was in that distortion experience, I didn't even have a connection of what I was eating. It just showed up on the counter in styrofoam with plastic on top, and then it was cooked and it tasted great. Like it wasn't like I was brought into an understanding of what was actually happening. So I was just unconsciously participating. And it was incredibly powerful for me. I remember the very moment I made the connection of what I was actually doing. By the way, this is not a sales pitch for everyone should be a vegetarian and they're bad and wrong people if they eat.
Right. Yeah.
It just is an expression of my own experience of looking into a cow's eye and realizing I don't want to eat this being that is my friend. I don't want to do that. Now, of course, I was growing up in Virginia, and as a child, I came home, I announced to my mother that I wasn't going to eat cows anymore. And I was told there wasn't a chance in hell that I was going to become a vegetarian. No, I didn't know a vegetarian. I didn't live in a cultural context where that was a thing. And so it wasn't until I was 16 that I stayed committed, even though I wasn't given permission to follow that. I stayed committed. And then when I was 16, my mother said, if you cook all your own food, you can do whatever you want, but I'm not cooking vegetarian food for you. And so I started doing that. And I've been a vegetarian since I was 16. Again, this isn't a sales pitch. This isn't everyone should do that. It's just a way to speak to those moments in our lives when we know we don't want to participate in something anymore, because we know how it feels in our heart.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm inspired by reading your book that, well, everything's the same. And I love the deer that hang out at my house. I don't like deer season. And maybe there's a pull for me to to not eat meat anymore. But I'm just saying what it is, and I'm getting this I'm getting this inspired hit that says, take a look at this, Bill. So I'm just doing it live.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both love the process of inquiry.
Yeah.
So if we really and this is a lot of what's in the book, our collective conditioning around right and wrong and should and shouldn't, that is what binds so much. It limits the free movement, the beautiful inquiry that that takes us deeper into truth if we're committed to inquiry, not result.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the gist of what your book is about is liberation and freedom from the tyranny of our own cultural or conditioned self experience to live the experience that we are destined for. And everyone is destined for this is the kingdom of heaven that Jesus was pointing to, and it is the middle way. It is the path that the Buddha was speaking of, and the great sages. The king. This is it. We can live in these bodysuits and have the experience that is our inheritance, the prodigal son come home experience. And that's another thing I want to say, Caverly. Your meditations are so beautiful, and your book is like a meditation experience. Your practices bring the reader so carefully into an introspection that it's not harsh. It's almost like the moth to the flame. It's just that gentle dissolution of the thing that was keeping me from self-realization, or the thing that was keeping me from the experience of inner peace and equality.
Yeah. Bill, thank you. I want to uplift Rupert Spira for a moment, because I came from a monastic tradition that, in my experience, had quite a bit of harshness to it. So I was living in a plywood hermitage on a hill. If I screamed, no one would have heard me. I had one hanging light bulb. I had an outhouse out back, and I did that for 8 years. And there was even meals were facing a wall, with total focus on the experience of eating to the best of your ability. And this approach was very disciplined. And I actually have a lot of gratitude for what living a life of discipline gave to me. What Rupert gave to me was something entirely different. He modeled a gentleness in approach that I had never experienced before. And his meditation, I feel very indebted to, if you have any sense of that in how I offer meditations, I just feel the need to uplift that's direct. I don't think Rupert likes the word transmission, because he's so allergic to the notion of guru, and he has guru Teflon. But there's a type of transmission that I feel very grateful for. And it has to do with years of witnessing how gentle he is in relationship with others. Always an eye on truth, but gentle in the journey to experience truth.
Yeah, thank you, Rupert, our beloved brother and friend. It was Rupert was the piece that was missing for me, that made me realize the end of seeking. It made me realize that just his last book. We just finished a 20-week book study on "You Are the Happiness You Seek," and then prior to that, being myself. They're just his pointing is so clear and so direct. And if you've been on this path for a long time, as we both have been in different ways, you know what you know when you know it, and it's right there in front of you, and you taste it and you feel it, and yep, this is it. This is what I've always been looking for. And so thank you, Rupert, for the clarity that you present. He was my guest about 2 months ago. on this show, and so we're just bringing accolades to the guy that really deserves it. Not to put him on a pedestal, but he's kind of like Jesus. He really doesn't like to hear
He would
this.
be very allergic to that
Oh no,
statement.
listen, I've said it before. I've said it, and he does not like to be compared to Jesus, but I would say that he's in our lifetime, he's an icon. He's paving a road for hundreds of thousands of people and probably millions to follow.
Yeah, it on lots of different levels too. I mean, for example, I've been very impacted by his meditation approach. I've also been impacted by his care about our Peace in Schools program. So the program in which we're bringing practices of inquiry to teens in Portland, hopefully, actually, definitely in the Bay Area soon. We have a strategic plan that I don't want to say hopeful. I want to say yes. This is what we're doing. We're going to be
Good.
moving our program into the Bay Area and then beyond. So we're about to conduct a pilot program for scaling. His support for this program, his generosity around introducing me to folks who he recognizes might be interested in how teachings can be tailored for a public high school context. And truly tailored, like tailored meaning not a religious program in a school, an opportunity for young people to come in through whatever door they're coming in through and ask really important questions that we otherwise don't ask in high school, like, who am I? What does it mean to belong? How can I truly know love? In a world where maybe I don't feel that I'm receiving a lot of love, or I don't have a lot of direct experience of unconditional love.
Well, thank you, Caverly, for your heart and your willingness to step forward as called for this. Because I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like when I was in high school. We were drug addict. We were into drugs, alcohol, rock and roll, all
All the
that
good
stuff,
things.
and alcoholic parents, and
Yeah.
dads that beat us up, or moms that were just not kind, or houses that didn't have parents, and some tragedy happened. And if there was a space where someone could hear, something that could be facilitated, that allowed the turmoil of the heart to be exposed and resolved, that would have been, oh my God, that would have saved a lot of lives for a lot of my friends that didn't make it to adulthood. So I'm just, when I read about this program and the care journaling and all of those kinds of things that are promoted through Peace in Schools, I'm encouraged. I think this is a great thing. I think it's a little too slow. It needs to catch fire and go across the country and world.
Well, you never know, Bill. There might be someone listening that says, I'm ready to help them build the foundation for that expansion, because it's true. I actually feel quite clear that we've now tested this program. We have Johns Hopkins research along with our own direct experience of this is working. And I'm really ready to see more teens reached. And at this point, it's all about just the resources to make that happen, the infrastructure to make that happen. We're in that kind of, we're referring to it internally at Peace in Schools as we're ready for the 2.0 experience, because we're in 8 schools. As you mentioned, it's the first semester long credited mindfulness course in the country. So we're in 8 schools here in Portland, and yeah, I'm very clear that that's a small amount of teens if you look at the big picture. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll
Well,
see.
you must be, I mean, it must be recognized as something that the federal government is going to accept and endorse because I mean, you're in federal schools, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're only in public schools at the moment, and it is amazing how even in this divided time, one place that you can see sort of cross divide agreement is our, care for our young people. And so there's some really tremendous work being done to try to recognize that ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are a really serious problem, and that programs like this, Dr. Christina Bethel actually was named in Congress, spoke in Congress about peace in schools and other interventions that can support basically how to work with the level of ACEs that we're currently swimming within and dealing with the fallout of.
Hmm. Right. Well, getting back to the heart of who we are, when I was reading that that manuscript, I got a sense when I was about two-thirds through that this was a life work. Even though I mean, I know you wrote it within the last 4 years. It seems like there's a lot of setup. I mean, you give some really great backstory content and setting the storyline up for your really the I think one of the aspiring messages that you have threaded throughout this book is the racism piece. And your backstory talks about, noticing early on that you were white privileged, and then when you talk about coming out of the monastery or looking around the monastery and recognizing there wasn't a black person in the anywhere in sight, and so this has been following you your lifetime.
Yeah, it has. As you saw at the beginning of the book, I named the book as a reconciliation of sorts. And, I speak very clearly in the introduction about what it was like to make these um, commitments to living a life of not harming, but then look around and see so many different ways that I'm participating in harm, and to ask how to reconcile that from a deeply heart-centered place, because I knew how to reconcile it from you probably saw in the book, I give the example of a aspect of my own personality that my husband calls Justice Judy. I knew how to reconcile it from that kind of angry activist place.
Yeah,
I had experience with that. I also had experience with that not working and not nourishing my deepest longing.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and I was curious about a couple of things in this book, Caverly. Did you have a subtitle, or did you have a different story? Like, there's not anything about racism in on the cover, and only a couple of the endorsements mentioned the content of race, and yet I found it all through the content of the book.
Well, Bill, one of my very favorite things about this book is that so far, everyone who's read it has a slightly different place that they grab onto. So I can tell you this, when I first wrote the book, it was actually even more heavily about race, and it was called Collective Liberation. And thank God, as you see from my endorsements, I feel very blessed to have beloved friends, people of color who gave me very important feedback. And one of the pieces of feedback I got is we've my community has been talking about collective liberation forever, and now you, white woman, are going to walk in and name your book Collective Liberation. And it was just one of those really sobering moments,
Yeah.
like so many through the book,
Hmm.
that I realized how I would need support every step of the way, if even talking about race at all. And very fortunately, I want to uplift my friend Zakiya Rhodes, um, a woman of color, a Black woman who read this book alongside with me and gave me incredibly important feedback. I didn't write this book alone, and that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
But you know, my when I was writing this book, my vision was to write a book that both Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams and Rupert Spira could endorse. And I knew that was an incredibly tall order. I
Yes.
knew that there were very few books out there that both people would say yes to. So I have many people of color who have read this book, and for them, they're reading the race stuff like yeah, like, and they're just like, you know, whipping through it. There's nothing there. It's not really even that interesting to them,
Yep.
but they're
Yep.
speaking to me about a practice that they hadn't considered before. Or I have a dear friend who recently said, I've never looked at survival strategies in my own life in that way. And now I'm looking at what it looks like collectively, especially for me as a Black woman. So again, some people look at the book, it's sort of like what are those tests called when you sort of,
Litmus test.
yeah, it's sort of a little bit of a litmus test. Some people see, you know, a non-dual meditation book. You know, Dr. Kristen Neff, who I'm who read the book and wrote a lovely endorsement, you know, really picked up on the social justice piece.
Yes. Hmm.
uh, I have other people who really, there's one particular endorser, Jan Chosenbays. She really has spoken to me about how meaningful the work around teens is, and
Yes.
that was sort of where she and I connected the most. For a non-dual, a fellow non-dual teacher, lover of truth, that there's nuanced conversation about the meditations and how we move from a progressive path to a direct experience, how we don't have to throw away progressive path contemplative technologies in our understanding that of the value of a direct approach, that in a sense we don't have to see those things dualistically.
Yep. Well, and I feel the book stands on its own without racism as a part as a purpose or as a reason to read it. It's a real awakening tool. And if you have an idea where you think racism might be part of your DNA, part of your unconscious guilt or shame or projection, or the harm that you may have done to humanity, this is the place to clean it up. In my mind, this is the cleanup. This is the healing mechanism that is using non-dual understanding and the direct experience and the self-inquiry all in one place to to clear it out so that you can be free, so that you can have the direct experience of presence and oneness and beingness fully and share it unabashedly with everyone you see. Yeah.
Bill, thank you. I appreciate you reflecting that back, and what's alive for me as you speak it or as I hear it, is the recognition of the value of not seeing bringing attention to something like racism, uh, to be free to bring attention to it while being released from conditioned shame, for example. So I talk in the book about how there really just can't be growth. There can't be collective evolution of human consciousness without without the releasing of this shame that binds us.
Yeah. Well, before we're just about out of time. Before we leave, and thank you for being on the Awareness Podcast, Caverly, and that we have this is such a rich content and really a, 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 a book authored for freedom, for healing, and for a timely introspection of our own experience in matters that matter, like the peace in schools. That, I mean, if you're my age and you have grandkids, you really, or somebody else's grandkids and kids, we need to be concerned and inspired to help humanity, to help of all countries and diversities of color and cultural background, whatever it is. Our place here, we need to leave something behind for our kids and for everyone's kids that means something. And I think your book really points to that. Your work points to that. And I'm going to read what Rupert said about this book, if you don't mind. This is his endorsement in your book. He says, "Transcendence and transformation in the heart of who we are. Caverly deftly holds two seemingly opposing truths: our shared being of oneness, whose nature is peace, and our shared world of apparent separation and its suffering, and invites us to explore how our true nature might find its fullest expression in both ourselves and the collective. This beautiful and courageous book not only provides a way for us to explore who we are and how we are in the world, but stands as a shining example of what it means to do both." Rupert Spira is, he's an amazing guy, but Rupert's just one of about a dozen of the who's who of all kinds of many traditions. Zen, not Zen, brilliant icon individuals that have made a mark in this world. And I just loved, when I started reading the endorsements, I decided to take a little trip and to look each one up and to see what they're about. And oh my God, I was blown away by the quality and the content of your endorsements of this book, Caverly. Thank you for representing the truth the way you do and have. And if you were to pick out the most valued piece or the most valued theme or message of this writing, what would it be?
That it's possible to live in this world on behalf of the truth of who we are and the heart of who we are. And that sometimes that takes a practice of sorts, in even though that's inherently what is inherently who we are, the disillusion, the dissolving of what we've created on behalf of a collective ego can be incredibly fruitful. It can be actually even a joyous journey together as we become free. Again, we're inherently free, but we wouldn't be having this conversation if it weren't that there was so much suffering in the world based on the distortion that we are other, that there's separation. So I'd say the main message of the book is that it's possible to align our lives with our deepest experience of the heart of who we are, and that we can, the subtitle is Realizing Freedom Together, that we can realize freedom together in community. And I'd be remiss, Bill, if we ended the call and I didn't just give an acknowledgement that Rashid Hughes and I are going to be doing a book collective journey over the course of a year. So we'll go through every chapter a month. And I'm excited about that deep immersion. So if there's any interest in that for some of the listeners, I just want to give a shout out that Rashid Hughes is a meditation teacher, restorative justice facilitator from deep non-dual understanding, and facilitator in Washington, D.C. area. And I'm excited to be sharing space with him as we move through a year-long course around what's in the book.
Okay, cool. Well, before we go, I do have still like one big open question. You are a teacher of meditation, I mean, your bio, and also you offer amazing meditations. I did one with you in a recorded meditation. And it was beautiful, and I don't see, and I didn't feel the old paradigm meditation happening. It feels like your meditation is more in alignment with the direct experience, the direct path approach of meditation. Did your meditation change since meeting Rupert Spira?
My meditation changed since meeting Rupert, since experiencing the direct approach, the kind of pointings that can be offered in meditation practice with the direct approach. And it should be acknowledged, it's no surprise that you probably ended up with a meditation that is along those lines, but that's not actually the only thing that I offer. And the reason why is because I have such a deep commitment to meet who's in the room. So if I have a weekly group that gathers, and just the other day, I offered a chanting practice that was given to me by a mentor named Walter McKitchen, who founded the Center for Self-Teaching in Sacramento years ago, and who was a very important mentor in my life, taught me everything I know about the energetic system. So what Rupert did for me was give me language for the backdrop of everything I was experiencing, but had no words for. But all the tools that I've experienced along the way still feel like rich gems that actually just shine more brightly within the context of non-dual understanding. And because I work with the people I do, it's simply not always the right thing to walk people straight into the kind of meditation that you might have heard. I'm in lots of settings where that doesn't feel like it would actually meet the people who I'm in the room with. Because I don't only offer retreats where people are coming to sit and practice with me. Sometimes I'm in a situation that's just quite different than that. But retreats are sort of the candy of my life. I love leading retreats where there's just nothing but shared focus on.
Yeah. Well, thank you for everything that you do for the world, Caverly, and thank you for this book. And I'm very happy that I was able to share it with this audience on this podcast. And for all of you that are listening, if you have Audible or you're a member at Sounds True, Caverly's Audible version of this book will be out December 13th, I think I read. And you can go on the waiting list right now on Amazon and order your copy. It will be out November 29th, I think.
And actually, I think that I don't know much about the publishing world, but I do hear that the pre-orders help. So that's thanks for plugging that. That'd be wonderful.
Good,
I'm
good.
excited to share the book with others. And Bill, thank you so much just for your heart, for spending time together today, and for everything you're doing in the world.
Thank you, Caverly. It was my joy to have you on the show, and I look forward to seeing you in person again.
Me too. Thanks, Bill.